Hi, and welcome to Be Fucking
Freaking
For
for real.
Real. I'm your host, Tori Naim, and I'm here with my mom.
Amy Chen Mills.
And today we will be talking about the three principles.
Dun da da. The three magical principles to improve your life in untold ways.
All right, so what are the three principles?
Well, the three principles, I think I should point out that they were discovered, quote unquote, by a man named Sydney Banks, who was a welder, a ninth grade educated welder living in British Columbia, Canada, who had this huge insight about life, and it like totally changed his life. And after he had this insight about life, people came to listen to him speak, including your grandfather, Dr. Roger Mills.
A welder, like
Yeah, welder.
in ninth grade?
No, he graduated in ninth grade. Like he
Oh.
graduated only from he didn't graduate from high school.
Oh, so he just was a welder who did ninth grade?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but he was working as a welder. He grew up in Scotland. I think he was adopted.
Okay, so we know who made it. What are
He
they?
discovered them.
He discovered them.
Yeah, he would say they discovered him.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the first one?
So the three principles are mind, which is the energy and intelligence of all life, whether in the form or formless. So the energy of trees and plants and seasons and nature, and also, and also the intelligence of those things, of nature, and also of you.
Cool.
If that intelligence is in nature, it's also in you.
So I guess the spiritual side of everything.
Yeah, well, the spiritual side, or he would say there's not even two sides, it's all one.
Like the energy.
The energy of life.
Us.
Yeah, like I think in biology they call it the life force, and in physics they call it just energy. It's sort of like the intangible stuff that life is made out of.
Okay, what's number two?
Number two is the principle. They're not really there's not an order, but consciousness. Consciousness is our ability to experience life. So it's like awareness.
So in the three principles are like all things conscious or just some things?
Consciousness is kind of like everything, but in terms of ourselves, it's like you're conscious of me, I'm conscious of you. You have your five senses, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling.
So are like plants conscious?
Plants, I think plants are conscious, but that's not something Sydney Banks would get into. He did not. I didn't hear him talk about that. I bet he would assume that they were.
Okay.
Because they have intelligence in life. And there are some mystics who think that everything, rocks and mountains and everything, is part of one energy, maybe conscious also.
Do you believe in that?
I think it's all part of one energy, because in physics, if you look at like a rock and you go into the atom level, like the molecular structure and the atomic structure, there's a lot of things whizzing around and moving around in there. In fact, some people say there's more space than solid matter in like a rock.
Okay.
Yeah, in between the protons and the electrons and the... I'm not a physicist.
I know.
I'm a coach and a counselor and a mental health educator.
Okay. What's the third?
The third one is thought. Thought is the principle or the power in us that allows us to, it works with consciousness, to perceive creation and to also interpret it in our own ways. So like if you and I look at like that lamp, that red lamp on the desk right there, I have a thought about it because I know where I got it. I have a history. You might look at it and think it's ugly or tacky or beautiful or whatever, or it's too cluttered in here or whatever.
I have a history with it too. I grew up with this lamp.
Yeah. How do you feel about it?
feel like it's a good lamp.
You feel like it's a good lamp?
It does its job, does it?
Yeah,
Does
it
even
does.
work?
It actually works. You can turn it on. But my point being that someone else might come in and look at the lamp and not have any feelings of affection or think it's tacky or whatever.
What? So it's like memory?
No, what I'm saying, yes, memory is a thought, but basically we're all walking around this earth always looking at things and interpreting them through our thoughts. So like even the name of something, it's part of our memory, right? Like the blind that we had to pull down on the window we call it a blind because that's in our thoughts, in our thought system.
We're getting very meta here.
Yep, they're
And
very meta.
is it like all about like all of this? It kind of reminds me of like the id and like, you know, when I was doing psychology, we were learning about like the ego and the id and the whatever. Is there like different, are these all on different levels, like mind, thought, and consciousness, or are they like the same?
I think that if I give you some metaphors, it would help.
Okay.
Sydney Banks used to say they're all one, but we break them in the one into three to be able to teach and share so people can understand. Okay, so let's just talk about your thoughts and feelings and your emotions. Okay, so consciousness, here's a metaphor that seems to work for people. It's like a cup of hot water and it's neutral. And in order to make a cup of tea, you have to have a what?
A kettle.
A kettle, but what do you have to put into the water?
Tea.
Tea or a tea bag. Mm-hmm. And the tea comes in all kinds of different flavors. Mm-hmm. And so when you put in a flavor of mint or chamomile or whatever, rubiose, whatever you like, put that tea bag in, and then the water becomes the flavor of the tea. Yeah. The water changes, it becomes a color, a flavor, a smell.
So this is like emotions.
So every time you put a thought in your mind, it's putting a tea bag, basically.
It's tinting your
in the water.
Conscious.
Exactly.
That, yeah.
What do you think of that?
Us, but with our mad and sad goggles. My mom adapted this 3 principles into mad and sad goggles. I mean, everyone knows the saying rose-colored glasses, but like there's a bunch of tints of glasses, I think. Right, like we talk about moods. When you're having a lot of sad thoughts, then you have your sad colored glasses on, and everything in the world looks sad. Mm-hmm. If you're afraid, everything looks scary. Mm-hmm. If you're mad, everything kind of makes you mad. Mm-hmm. Like if you're mad and then you go like drive in your car or walk down the street and somebody cuts you off or almost hits you, or it doesn't even almost hit you, but they possibly could have maybe. You get much more upset when you're already mad. Yeah. Right? I feel like that's a basic understanding that people have. I think an important thing, and I think this relates to the 3 principles, is not trying to take those glasses off, but just realizing and acknowledging that you have them on. Right. So that's the basic core of the principles is life is not necessarily bad in the moment. It's just that whatever you're thinking is bad. Mm-hmm. You yourself are not necessarily bad. And that's a very core, like we have subconscious thoughts. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our subconscious thoughts have to do with, I'm not a good person. Remember we talked about good people, bad people in a different episode. And we think about ourselves a lot, but all that is just thought. That's the key, is we think there are certain thoughts we have to think. Like Sydney Banks talked about being an orphan, being adopted. And he used to say, I used to feel bad and just be mad at people in my past, in my childhood. But he realized that it was only hurting him because they weren't really around him anymore. And he was carrying all these negative thoughts. Yeah. And I feel like the only thing that keeps these memories in existence are our thoughts and are ourselves. Because like, isn't it about like living in the now as well? Yeah. Like you don't have to have you choose to have this negative history in your brain that makes up your identity, who you are. You don't have to. Right. But you're just carrying around those thoughts forcefully because sometimes we punish ourselves. We do. We have this weird thought that if we punish ourselves, we'll be better. Mm-hmm. But actually what happens? Did we already talk about identity? No, but I don't think so. But it's always good to talk about. Yeah. Go ahead. That's kind of like the same. Like, I don't know. When I was in, sorry, what were you saying? Did you ask me a question?
I asked you, I don't know, go ahead though. Talk about identity. I think it's important.
I feel like identity is like consciousness. I don't know. This really reminds me of like the ego and the id and like psychology and just like, um, I feel like, oh, during quarantine when I was like depressed, sorry, I'm going to try not to say like so much, but I am a teenager. So, I was having a lot of conflict and struggles about my identity and who I am. And I was also starting high school. So that was very scary for me too. And I was just like, never feeling like I was being myself. Like when people are like, oh, just be yourself. Like everything will be fine. People love you. I'm like, I don't even know who I am. Like, I don't, like, I just found myself a lot of the times, like, thinking about, like, what I'm going to say before I say it, running situations over in my mind, and, like, having no idea, like, losing all sense of self, really, just because of my anxiety and, like, me feeling uncomfortable and just second guessing everything. And my mom just helped me a lot with that. And just, like, looking at it in a whole new lens where it's just like, you don't there is no like you like I feel like we hype up or like get so involved in like how we display ourselves and our identity and our ego that like we feel like we act this way and we have to act this way all the time. And like I don't know, but I think people are changing all the time. And I think my mom was just like, everything you do is who you are, and like right now you're being yourself, like that's yourself. Like it's just really easy to get wrapped up in our ego and like
Thinking about yourself.
yeah.
Well, and I've been working with a teenager recently, and we were talking about self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people think you have to have high self-esteem. You have to be true to yourself and be yourself, but people don't know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where this mind principle comes in, the energy of life. Like when you're not thinking about yourself, like think about when you were a child and you hadn't developed an identity.
You just are.
You just are, and you're happy and you have high self-esteem.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I'm part of life and I can dance and I can sing and I can cook and I can.
Yeah. I feel like that's what really traps people in like focusing on their mental health, because everyone's like, love yourself before you love everyone else, or like self-care, like
Right.
be you, be confident in
Right.
yourself. And everyone's like,
how do I do that?
I don't even know who I am. Like what? Like I don't know.
Exactly.
Like what the heck? But
that's a good point.
It is. And I feel like one of the biggest parts of spirituality and the three principles is there is no you. Like you are not anything, and like you need to let go of your ego. I feel like we're all like in a TV show, and like we have all this history and our memories and our past, and it's like, oh, this is who I am, like this is how I act, this is what I've done, and I'm going to do this all the time, and like I have this whole plan in my mind for how things are going to go. But once you let that go, you're going to start to have more fun, and you're going to start to like actually live.
Did that happen for you?
It did. And honestly, all of this credit goes to my mom, and also the show Midnight Gospel. If you're struggling with anything, like this is what I watched during quarantine, and it totally helped me like look. Like I know my mom like tells me all the time and like whatever, but you know, it's hard to like listen to your parents. Like you think you're so much smarter than them, and like you know everything, and like I don't know. But once I watched the show and then I realized stuff and I like looked at everything differently, then like I could take everything that my mom was telling me deeper, and like I could actually understand it rather than just like listening or like hearing it. I could soak it in and understand.
That show has very weird graphics, animation, but I like that person interviews some really interesting characters.
It's good. That's
There's
why
a whole show on death that was really good. I like that show. And there was a show with Anne Lamott, I think.
I don't know.
She's a Christian. She's a spiritual writer. wouldn't say she's very religious. She lives in the Bay Area.
Oh, cool.
She's very famous actually, and she's a good person to read, I think. Well, so yeah, identity. I mean, people may be like, what do you mean there's no self? Like, that might be too kind of like vague and trippy for people. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's just like when you're not thinking about yourself, like, where did you go? You still are.
Mm-hmm.
So that energy of life is moving through you. And as you get older, you try to control things more because you think you have to build yourself up and be a certain kind of person. And really, like, what I learned in my 20s when I went through depression
Mm-hmm.
also is to start to let go
Mm-hmm.
and just be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to not know. And then this energy of life, this intelligence would start to sort of move through me because you have an intelligence
Yeah.
and it's responsive and it kind of knows what to do a lot of the time. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It does to me, but I think, yeah, it's hard to really like, it's not like we all of a sudden realize this and then we're like this all the time when we're always super like go with the flow and we're always living the moment and we're never trapped in our egos. Like,
Me and you?
yeah,
Oh,
we
definitely
are
not.
trapped in our egos all the time.
Okay,
Like,
50%.
it's like a day-to-day battle. It's like a minute-to-minute battle trying to live in the moment and not like get wrapped up in like how we are being perceived and how we perceive ourselves. Like, it's extremely hard, especially like in this day and age. But I think an important thing to remember is that like there's no winning in spirituality. There's no like, I don't believe in like, oh, you reach nirvana and you're there forever. Like, you're never gonna have bad thoughts and anxious thoughts. Like, you're always gonna have that. And I think the beautiful thing about spirituality is like you can be spiritual just by like acknowledging that, you know?
Yeah, you can sort of be like, okay, I'm human. And then that takes a whole level of self judgment.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a whole level of thoughts off of your mind.
Yeah.
When you just say, okay, I'm human, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I'm fearful, I'm depressed. This is very human.
Yeah.
We just don't always talk about it so much.
Yeah.
Your generation talks about it a lot more, actually.
Mm-hmm. I made a podcast.
And we even made a podcast. You decided to make a podcast. Can I add one more metaphor?
I was thinking about, sorry, before I lose my train of thought, I was thinking about what you said about emotional intelligence. And I think like to elaborate on that more, like when I was really anxious and depressed over quarantine, or not even quarantine, just high school in general, and I would go hang out with my friends and I would come back and I'm like, Mom, I'm anxious all the time. Like, I'm always thinking about like what to say before I say it. Like, I don't know who I am. Remember when I came to you a lot?
Yeah.
Because I was so anxious about fitting in and being like whatever.
Yeah.
And you would just ask me like, oh, like I would say like, oh, I feel this all the time. Like, it happens to me every second of the day. I'm always anxious. I'm always like this. And you like wouldn't believe me. You're like, there's times where you're just living like when you're with us or when you're like actually laughing and having fun with your friends or like where you do feel included. Like, you're not anxious. You're not thinking about that. And I think like identifying those moments and not like, I did this, like, I would be like, no, Mom, I'm always anxious. Like, you don't understand. And I would like not lie, but that's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not remembering these moments where I actually did feel like I belonged and I actually didn't have any anxiousness thoughts holding me back and I was living in the moment. I would kind of shut those or like hide those in my mind because I wanted to like have this persona that I'm an anxious teenager and everything's like gonna go bad and I'm gonna die and everything's like,
why did you want to have that?
I don't know. It was like when I was having tantrums as a baby, like I wanted to be mad. Like, I didn't want to be better.
You wanted the attention.
I wanted the attention. Yeah. I wanted to be mad. Maybe I want the attention now. Maybe I'm anxious, but like I feel like it's a whole ego thing. Like, I don't even know. It's weird. But like
sometimes you want it when you're feeling bad,
mm-hmm.
and you want someone to kind of just love you and care for you. Mm-hmm. So you might make it a little worse than it is.
Yeah. But I don't know. I didn't even like, because like even if I was alone, I would feel that way.
Feel what?
That my whole life was anxious thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't acknowledge those times where I didn't feel anxious. I would put those in the back of my mind.
But those are so important because what they remind you of is this childhood state of being. And mm-hmm. I know that some children have a very tough childhood, maybe an abusive childhood. Nonetheless, underneath all of that is this core, what we call innate mental health, this inner peace, this inner state of wonder and curiosity and a relaxed state of just being in life without trying to control life, without trying to control how people think about you. And the really important thing about understanding the principles, and I think this is a really important podcast, actually, I think this will be a good one if people listen to it, is that it's only thought that's getting in the way. It's only thought, and it can be very deep rooted thoughts or thoughts that have been subconscious and with you for some time. But when you understand that thought is not, I have a colleague who used to say, it's not bricks and mortar, it's just smoke. That was Kathy Casey, who I used to work in the jails with, alongside, I should say. And that's the potential of that is huge, because as I've gotten older, I've let go of a lot of my insecure thoughts, and that's what hopefully we all can do. But then there's always more to see. Like you always say, I'm defensive. So that's a thought that I have, like some kind of thought pattern that I have, where like I have to defend myself, right? That's what defensive is, I suppose. And that's an idea of the self. Like, I don't want to look bad. I don't want people to think badly about me. It's interesting because it's more so in our family than outside in the world. And I don't know why. For some people, it's flipped. Like they have more thinking outside in the world than inside of their family. Or they have more thinking at work, or they have,
like,
or at school.
People like, oh, you have more thinking in your family than outside in the world?
Probably. I don't know why.
I have more thinking outside in the world.
I know. That's good for you.
Well, you have a husband, so.
I have a husband. It's always challenging. But really, it's just because here's a thought that you have when you're married, and maybe with your family too, but more so when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be with this person literally for the rest of my life, living with them for the rest of my life. And so whatever they say or do has this impact on me for the rest of my life. But actually what that does is it kind of solidifies like how you see the person, and then that affects their behavior, because negativity usually creates negativity. Mm-hmm. And positivity usually creates positivity.
I agree with that. Like you put out the energy that you receive in the world.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And you spark positivity. Like when you're kind and nice to me, like if I'm stressed out, which we've talked about. Mm-hmm. And you say, oh, Mom, and you say something nice, or say, I need to lose weight. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're so skinny. I'm like, okay.
I always say that.
I'll go with that. It does make me feel like, okay. I mean, it's just a very sort of superficial thing.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the caring behind it. Like one thing, Sydney Banks, I mean, I think it was kind of nice that he was a welder and he wasn't highly educated, because he spoke very simply, and you can find him online. You can find his videos. And, I have a book for kids called The Spark Inside. It's at my website. I'll give out that info. I have a book for teachers, which parents could also really benefit from, called State of Mind in the Classroom, but you could call it State of Mind in the Home, right? Because it's about being around kids, young kids and teenagers. But the nice thing about Sydney Banks was that he was very simple, and he just kept things really simple. And sometimes he would just talk about sharing and caring, like loving your clients, loving your students, loving your family, like really just trying to love them. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times we know what would be nice to do for someone, but we're just in a bad mood and we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Like you and your sister.
Like you and Dad.
Yeah, like me and Dad, yeah. No, seriously, it's true. Are we getting defensive?
Yeah, and I feel like that's argued, like that's the root of all conflict, your ego. And that's on period.
And so
that's why we fight.
Sydney Banks used to say the ego is the whole problem. Mm-hmm. The whole problem. And the ego is the image of self-importance.
Yes.
And I sometimes say the ego is the image of the self. Just period. Like you create an image and it's an image in thought. And it changes. So that's why you don't even have like a set self in your thought system. It changes all the time.
Yeah.
So just let it go. And
don't
then,
even have one.
Right.
If it changes all the time.
And then as you let go, you're more connected to that energy of life, which is also everybody shares. So you feel more connected. You're more part of this, what's called the oneness.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Should I give the other metaphor just for practical purposes?
What other metaphor?
There's another metaphor.
I'm going to put a little disclaimer, in 2 seconds when I go out and I go shopping to buy clothes.
Yes.
I am going to forget all of this and I'm probably going to get wrapped up in my ego. And my mom is probably going to text someone and get wrapped up in her ego as well. So I just want you to remember that even people making a podcast and even the preachers don't, it's so hard. It's not hard, but it's give yourself a break and that's part of it.
Oh, can I give you?
Don't get wrapped up in don't make spirituality a thing that's making you have bad thoughts, don't put yourself to such a high standard of feeling crappy for yourself.
Yeah, you don't use it to judge yourself.
Yeah,
some people do. They feel worse because they're then they start thinking, "Oh, I'm having bad thoughts. They notice their thoughts more, which is common. But can I just share a Sydney Banks quote related to what you just said? Sydney Banks said, "You cannot get rid of the ego, but you can find out what it is so that it does not control you." Should I give the metaphor?
Yeah.
So another metaphor we used to use was of a movie projector, like the old-fashioned kind where you put a big reel of film in and you run the projector. There's a light that shines through the film onto a screen. And so in this metaphor, the power source where you plug in the projector is like mind, the energy that makes everything run. The film is your particular thoughts. The motor that runs the film is the power of thought, which is neutral. It can run any kind of film, but it's always running. And then the light that shines up onto the screen is your consciousness, making it all look real. So that was kind of helpful for people to think, oh, I'm just in a movie. I'm just watching a movie right now. It's not real. Sometimes when I'm tired or I'm in a bad mood, I'll start thinking, oh, everything I'm doing is worthless and my radio show and, it's too much and it's too hard and people, I just think all the negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And then I wake up the next morning and I have my cup of coffee and I run around a little. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I love doing my radio show.
Yeah.
I love my kids. I love my daughter.
Yeah.
So that's really important to know that you're just running a different kind of movie all the time. Sometimes it's a comedy, sometimes it's a drama, sometimes it's a horror film.
Just watch Inside Out, too.
Watch Inside Out the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a new one. Isn't
that's
there?
basically what we're saying. I feel like everyone knows this though. Not to be rude.
I don't think everyone knows it. They really don't. If they do, they only know it intellectually, because if everyone knew it, the world would not be so messed up. The world is a mess, of people thinking that they need money and they need more money and they need power and they need to control people. And that's how I see our politics right now. It's a mess. And people, I see it even just in our community. There are people who have an ego about things, Yeah. So I don't think people know it. Maybe they've heard it.
That's what I meant.
What did you mean? That they heard it before?
No, I just know, I know that people have the, not everyone obviously, but people have this basic understanding. It's just when you start using it in real time in real life that it starts working.
Yeah.
And it's also it's something that you grow doing. It doesn't come it's harder to do at first and then you start getting better and better at it. And once you start noting and like acknowledging like things that do give you bad thoughts and do make you anxious and do make you depressed, then you can like put yourself in better environments, or you can just have like better reactions. Like again, it's not the action, it's your reaction. Like that's the only thing you can control. And like that's what helped me.
If y'all have questions, you can email me at Amy, AMI, at amychen.com, AMICHEN.com. And we could address them in a future podcast because you might have questions. There's a lot of questions people often have, like, what if you're starving to death or you're in a war zone and, or what if this and that, or what if you have a physical problem?
I mean, that's kind of like, I don't know. Like when Midnight Gospel talked about death, like it's way easier to grasp and get an understanding of when you don't pay so much time and energy to your ego. Like it just helped me because I used to freak out about death a lot when like last year and like still now, I guess. But once you realize that like you like once you like my mom was saying, like once you take a step back from the movie or from the TV show or whatever you think your world or mind is, then it's easier to grasp the idea of not having a TV show or not having a movie and just being connected. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. And to accept that you might go back and forth. Right? Like, I mean, this is so important for young people and also people in their 20s, because I remember that as being a really insecure time when I also had a lot of anxiety, a lot of social anxiety, and I got depressed, and it took me a couple of years to really get out of that. And I didn't take medications at the time. I don't think we had Prozac and stuff then. But I did notice my thinking, and I had insights about my thoughts and spiritual experiences. And I don't know, like, I don't think everyone has to study the 3 principles, but there's a lot of spiritual truth out there.
No, yeah, I feel like the morals or like the principles in the 3 principles are underlining in a lot of religions.
It's true.
And other things. And like, I like support religions. I think they're like good to have as like a path or just to help people with like mental health and stuff. I don't support abusing religion to gain power
or to keep women down. Or LGBTQ plus people.
Yeah, and I think that looking at spirituality and religion in a way where it's like, I feel like spirituality is a little bit easier to like say you believe in because there's not really any rules, and like I feel like now I look at religion like in a way where I can just like see like the good parts of it, and like I don't know, it's good to like not be like tied down or like owned or like labeled with anything, because then you just feel kind of restricted.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rules and ideas in religions, and all of that are thoughts that have already been created. They're not new. Like a new thought, Sydney Banks would call it an insight, a sight from within. Like it's important to remember that you can have a spiritual insight, just like Sydney Banks or Jesus or Gandhi or MLK Jr. or Muhammad or Buddha or whoever, right? Like we all have access to the same spiritual source of truth and insight. And so when we put people on a pedestal, including people like Sydney Banks, we might forget that we actually are like, it's all about us. It doesn't matter if Sydney Banks had a huge spiritual insight. Who cares? What matters is how do we tap into that for ourselves.
Yeah, I feel like, I agree. Like we do lose it when we attach it to a group of people or a person or symbols or whatever. We lose like the meaning and the real values.
Yeah. Although I will say I notice because the world is so upside down, like we tend to really value our possessions and our, our job titles and our whatever, how much sex we're having, our relation, with just whatever looks on the outside, we think it makes us look good. The world is like the opposite in terms of its message. And so I have found it important. Like, I go to the Center for Spiritual Living on Sundays, and I also still am involved with colleagues in the Three Principles world. And I run my own classes, and I have my own clients, and that really helps me stay connected, because otherwise you can get pretty lost in this world in all the things that seem important.
I agree with you, but it's also like, I don't know. I feel like me and my mom have a little bit different views. What did I call myself? I'm not a nihilist. I'm a random. What is it called?
Oh, it was about like Epictetus.
Have you watched Have you read The Stranger?
Are you a Stoic?
No.
Oh,
you know The Stranger? Cool. The book Stranger?
Oh, Albert Camus?
Yeah, Albert Camus. Whatever that philosophy, what's it called?
Absurdism?
I think I'm a little bit absurdism, because like I will go shopping, I will post on Instagram, I will feel happy when I get a like. I don't think that makes me any less spiritual. I enjoy that happiness. I don't feel guilty about it.
No, it's not. That's not a problem. It's only when you get like an inflated self-concept and then you start bossing people around or thinking you're superior. Or when you get the opposite and people don't give you likes, and now all of a sudden you feel like a terrible person.
Yeah.
And that can be a problem.
It's all in moderate, but don't beat yourself up if you like shop from not thrift stores.
I think you should shop from thrift stores.
I know, but don't don't punish yourself. There's no hell in heaven in spirituality.
That's true. And it can help with some of the things we're facing, which we should do a whole nother show, facing the challenges of the world, like the climate crisis and the politics and the crazy people. Because one nice thing to know is you always, always have this connection to your own spiritual core.
And you need to surrender.
And we should probably wrap this up. Should we wrap it up?
I'm down.
Are you down for wrapping it up? There was
how long was this?
Oh, hang on 1 sec. Don't stop the recording. I just want to say that there's one really, really important piece, and we'll talk about it in the next episode, or one of the next episodes, which is to notice the feeling of your thoughts and the tone. And that will tell you when you're heading into trouble or not. It's like if you have a car that runs on fuel and you get a low oil light. I don't have that car anymore, but or a high temperature light, because I have an electric car. Yeah. And it tells you, wait a second, you're getting low on oil, or your car is overheating. What that means is slow down, get some oil, get some water. And that your mind is telling you that when you're starting to feel too angry or too upset or too whatever.
Yeah, pay attention to your body and pay attention to signs to look out for, and try to notice these things, and don't try to stop it by any means. Just acknowledging them, noticing them, doing it next time. Maybe drink some water, cool down, count to 5, breathing exercises.
Anything, walking, dancing.
Because I hyperventilate a lot, and I didn't know that.
Oh.
Do you know that when you get like...
I learn a lot of things on these podcasts, you guys.
Do you know when you get like pins and needles right here? I get them all the time, like before work or when I'm going to do something
really?
Nervous.
It means
you're hyperventilating, you're not getting enough air.
Oh, gosh.
So I'm like, whenever I feel my hands getting numb or something, I'm like...
Calm down.
Calm down.
Are you able to calm down?
Yeah, but I just need to breathe, because I feel like I forget to breathe.
Okay, right. So yeah, pay attention to your body.
And she says right when she doesn't believe me.
And that brings you into the present when you pay attention to your body.
Yeah.
Actually, because your body is kind of in the present. Your senses can bring you home.
Yeah, you look at colors. Name 5 colors around you.
Blue, gold, red,
what you
green.
Smell, what you're hearing. And then reach out.
Definitely reach out.
Talk to someone.
We don't expect you to do this on your own.
It's impossible.
It's nice to have help. It's nice to have support. it's nice to have a good counselor or a good group of people that are all kind of looking in the same direction.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm going to give out my website.
Tori Naim at www.
You can find this podcast and links to this podcast, and you can find my coaching practice and my books at www.amychen.com. Again, that's Amy with an I, CHEN as in Nancy.com. We want to thank Todd Zimmerman for doing all the editing work and also for the theme song. The theme song. Whoops. For this show. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. We'll catch you on the flip side in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to BFFR with Love, Tori and Amy. You can find all of our episodes at Amy Chen's website at amychen.com, AMICHEN.com on our show page, or go to Spotify, Apple, or YouTube and like, comment, subscribe to get this show out into the world. To find out more about Amy Chen Mills' coaching and education practice and her books, The Spark Inside and State of Mind in the Classroom for Educators, also go to her website at www.amychen.com. That's Amy with an I, CHEN, and also subscribe to our newsletter, which goes out usually about monthly, not much more than that. Thank you so much for listening and have an awesome, awesome life.